China is rapidly running out of time. We're going to talk about what's happening. We've got inflationary measures, deflationary. It is a mixed bag. I'm going to give you all the details so that you know everything. This will affect you no matter which country you are in. If you're in the US, if you're in Germany, if you're in Canada or New Zealand, pay attention because I'm going to bring you the details that you need to know. We will also look at what you, the individual, need to do and can do as a potential opportunity in this time, most difficult time. We've got to look at this and we've got to see what is best for us and our families. And I'll talk about all of that. Let's begin. Very first thing we need to look at is what's happening with the situation of China. Of course, you've got Country Garden, you've got Evergrande, you've got all of these different property developers that have been going belly up and they've been struggling big time. It isn't inside of China exclusively. Look at the one I brought to you just recently with Country Garden. They have in Malaysia, they have this massive, city forest, and that's what they call it, and that isn't being developed, at least to the degree that they suggested. And these properties are, of course, burdened by debt. You've got so much cash that has been sitting out there, investors putting their money in and never getting that money back. Potentially, there's a problem. That's one thing. But on the other side, and how this affects you, we've got to dig deep. So let me show you. China's property sector slump, you could look at it, property investment, property sales by floor area, and funds raised by developers. All of those have been down. We know that to be the case, but it goes a lot deeper. In recent videos, we talked about what was happening with these local debt financing vehicles, and it was a way to kind of kick the can down the road. But how does that work? Is that ever sufficient to actually fix a crisis? Look at Europe. They are in this position right now because they were unwilling to pull the plug, unwilling to rip that band-aid. It never ends well. Japan is in the same circumstance. You've got demographics problem. You've got the failure to admit your problems. And of course, look at the issues. They are permanent. Youth unemployment is surging inside of China. From what I know, from the business dealings I have inside China, it's becoming more difficult because people don't want to work at these factories. They want to work in office jobs. And so that has really been changing over the last couple of years. And this has been more difficult. Before, they could simply put the message out there, hey, we need some workers. They would come in. A lot of workers coming from the villages, they come into the cities. They are there for basically all year around, except for when they have their New Year celebration. And this comes at a time in which, they're having these difficulties over the last couple of years. They can't retain staff. Youth don't want to work there. The average worker, I believe, is something like 40 or 50 years old. It's gotten a lot older over the years. And so without that, they don't have the labor force there, and it pushes up the cost of labor too. So that means if the cost of labor is going to be relatively similar to Mexico, for instance, or other countries, now China looks less attractive when we're talking about exports. And that's how this begins to affect you. So pay attention. Here we go. Foreign investors are pulling their money out, with the central bank boosting efforts to staunch the yuan's tumble towards the weakest level since 2007. Yes, we have issues inside the financial system, and China each and every day seems to be throwing out stimulus measures. Have you found this video informative so far? If you did, make sure to hit that thumbs up. It supports me very much, okay? China is trying to prevent a full-on recession right now. They're doing everything. It's not just the real estate market. It's not just the local financing debt vehicles. You got to look at it on every level. Production, imports, exports, they are all down here. I've got some facts based around this as well. Daily stimulus measures have been introduced. And of course, we have the real estate debt crisis. This has all been adding up, and I want to get into more of that. China's industrial profits drop persists as economy weakens. You can't fix it with stimulus. But what does this tell you? Why is China so important, and why I keep hitting on it all the time? Every week I'm doing a China video. It's because that is a signal of what's going on outside of China into the global, the global environment. As you can see, if Germany doesn't need stuff, if France doesn't need stuff, if the US and so on, they're not putting out enough. So that is going to affect the industrial production inside of China. Yes, there's all kinds of different things, domestic consumption and so on, but know that what goes on inside of China is like, a canary in the coal mine for others as well. All right. So there's a lot to that because you get raw materials that may be coming from outside of China, and then they would come inside and they could produce their goods. The finished goods, they come from China and then they go out to all these different markets, whether it is anything from your iPhone to, a pen. It's all going to be coming from China. China is overwhelmingly so much further ahead in their logistics and than any other country. So this is very important to keep in mind. Okay, but now as we have rising costs, where are those rising costs coming from? You've got not only the labor rising costs as we just talked about, but you also have energy costs. You've got the fact that the materials cost more, the raw materials. And what I've seen, warehousing costs is more expensive inside of China. I'm able to give you this information because I actually do these things on a daily basis. I am dealing with this through my other businesses. And so if you pay attention to this channel, you're going to get an actual inside scoop, as well as when we read the data, looking at it all. So that's why you got to pay attention, okay? A lot of stuff to cover. Chinese weakness is bad news for companies such as Otis. Now, this is the elevator company. I'm sure you're aware of this. Well, China is its most profitable market for new equipment sales, accounting last year for roughly 1/3 of orders. Through the first half of last year, China was the company's only major market where orders were in decline. But that's important, okay? So you start to see this, and this is why I bring this to you. If China is having a problem, they're not building enough buildings, Otis is going to feel that impact. That's going to impact their stock. If their stock is having problem, well, guess what? They're going to show that on their reports. Their earnings are going to look worse, and they're going to say, well, sorry, everybody, we got to fire 5% of the staff, 10% of the staff. We got to get lean. We got to increase our productivity, all these different things. They can just use it as an excuse, even if it's going on inside of China. That's important, right? This is what companies do. But I do see comments from people who have clearly never worked at a big company, but that's besides the point. So the issue here is that you've got these companies like this that are reliant on China, not even for producing goods and then bringing them back into the Western countries. No, it's because they're exporting to those countries or they're dealing with those countries in some way. So keep an eye on that. Very important stuff. Look, markets need more stimulus and support for confidence inside of China. If they want the markets to come up, whether it's the real estate, whether it's stocks, stimulus is what they're looking for. So as you see the news coming out, keep an eye out for stimulus talk. That's all they want. That's all they want. Global growth will help China and trying to shift to the BRICS at the same time. So you're looking at this as you see it, global growth. If these different countries, whether it's the United States, whether it's somewhere in Europe and in Africa, wherever, if they're growing, well, that actually benefits China as well. At the same time, if you've got an issue right now geopolitically, as we'll talk about in a sec, going on with these different countries, well, China is now trying to shift their production, their alliances, everything they're doing to the BRICS nations, which have the population growth, which have their own issues too, but we could see that changing at that same time, all right? And trade relations must improve. We need to see more agreements. We need to see more of that, and this would be positive, net positive for China, but at this time, it's not coming fast enough, and that's why China is running out of time. That's why you could see all these different measures being put into place right here and now. China creates government body to support the private sector. Of course, they do need this. They need more investment, foreign investment, but money is leaving China in terms of their stocks, and guess where it's going? Can you guess? Can you guess? I talked about this in a recent video. Let me know in the comments below. Where is there a record high investment from foreigners inside of the stock market. Which stock market around the world has seen a record high investment? Let me know. Okay. Decades of U.S. corn export dominance fade as Brazil seizes the top supplier crown. That's connected directly with this. You can see world's top corn exporter 2023 and 2024 is Brazil. Very important stuff to look at it, because you could see China, BRICS nations, they're coming together and they are major resources. Like when we talk about resources, it's clear. The alliance is very clear. China is the big consumer, and then you have the suppliers, whether it is Brazil, Russia, Argentina, and Ukraine's a different story. But regardless, the point is you're seeing a lot of this coming from these countries that are aligned in some way with China. I need to talk about the geopolitical factors as well, because that's going to play a big role, and I want to know what you think about this. Gazprom claims it accounts for over half of Chinese gas import growth. I'm looking at this, again, the connection here, as we see with the resources and, of course, the alliances that China's building, that is ultimately strong in a long-term sense if we look 10 years out for China. Western officials plan to warn UAE over trade with Russia, but we know where they stand, okay? There is a dividing line in between East and West, and that is in the Middle East, okay? That's where that line is. And although Saudi and the UAE, they want to be friendly with every country, they're clearly doing something here. They joined the BRICS nations, very important stuff. US and Europe growing alarmed by China's rush into legacy chips. This was from a little while ago, but of course China has this now, as you see here, new phone sparks worry. China has found a way around US tech limits. So they took apart their phone, the new phone by Huawei, and they basically said, hey, this chip right here, this is some advanced technology that was supposed to be, we were supposed to be restricting them. Now, it's not the most advanced. It's not like, the latest and greatest, but it is further along than where the restrictions are in place for the United States, and they put, United States, Netherlands, and Japan. So that is something that the US is saying, uh-oh, this was much faster than we thought. So China is swinging back, and they're basically saying, no, you're going to restrict us. We're just going to create our own capacity. That's a simple matter of fact. We're going to do everything. And they are obviously have a reason to do that. This is another one I found interesting. I want to know your thoughts. Texas mogul is branded treacherous over deal of the century, which saw him sell 130,000 acres of farmland to a Chinese billionaire. This happens to be next to a military site. Do you think that foreigners should be able to buy land? And I should ask a second question, near any, I could put that caveat in there, near any sort of important infrastructure. So maybe they could buy a house in the middle of the suburbs. That's one story. But should they be able to buy land near an airport or near like water treatment, near electricity grid, and so on? I want to know what you think about that. If you want to be able to connect with like-minded people, you've got to join the Discord. There's a link in the description. You've probably asked yourself, what can I do? How can I possibly take advantage of this, or at least shelter myself? And I'm going to cover that right now, okay? I've got more in the Discord, but let me cover this. Be mindful of the company's exposure to China. Just like we saw with the example of Otis, you've got to pay attention here and say, does the company I work for or does the company I'm invested in have some sort of China exposure? And if I believe that China is slowly going to lose market share or have problems or suddenly be cut off because of semiconductors, who knows? Well, then I would want to trim my exposure, or, maybe I want to do the contrarian bet and say, actually, I think this is going to be the right opportunity to buy in now because prices have come down from their peak. But know the exposure. Very important, okay? You could look that up. It's available everywhere. If you want more details, just let me know. China is much further ahead in their logistics. Be mindful of that, okay? So if you're going to go out and source from a different country, you've got to watch out, okay? Because you know that China's got the ins and outs. They've got the imports. They've got the exports, that they just understand it all. They can deal with that. India is starting to get much better, but they're exporting primarily when it's, leather products, wood products. They're not there with the electronics. It really depends on the type of product that you're dealing with. So keep an eye out for that as well. You can't, and this is like as an investor too, you can't just shift your production. Yeah, if you're Apple, you can say, okay, I'm going to invest, $3 billion there. We're going to put our people in place. We're going to build that factory. We're going to have all the shipping done. We're going to have everything set up at the ports. That's fine when you're the biggest company in the world. But when you're a smaller, medium-sized company, you can't do that. Okay, and you've got to basically go super slow, and things change. Okay, things change over time. If China slows, global growth slows. Pay attention to that as well. So when you're looking as an investor, when you're looking for opportunities, know that this is going to be directly correlated. Okay, if you want more information, if you want to reach out to me directly, always available for everybody on Discord. Click that link in the description below. But don't go anywhere yet, because you were looking for the comment of the day. I know. Well, check it out. Mark had this to say: even if you own your home outright, costs of taxes, insurance, and repairs are becoming unsustainable for many. And I know people are feeling this right now. My goodness, I talk to people all the time, and they're struggling with that. The cost, their property taxes are up. They need to do repairs. These things add up, and it's just crushing people. And guess what? Your property taxes next year, they're going to be higher. Your property taxes the year after, they're going to be higher. And if your property happens to reduce in value by 30%, your property taxes are probably still going to be high. Okay. And that's the way it goes. And that's why we need to figure out a way to deal with this. Property taxes, in some cases, you can get that back. How do you do that? I've got a video inside of, I've got a how-to and solutions playlist. You could check that out. It only applies to a small percentage of people, but it's definitely worth noting. And for people that are on, they have a river going through their property, or for some reason they got agriculture, which, by the way, agriculture or livestock, in some cases you could have one chicken and your property will pass the test. You got to look into that for your own area. So check it out. You can get about, either all of your property tax back or 75%. There's different rules. If you're living in the suburbs or the urban environment, probably not going to qualify, but check it out for your area. I hope you appreciate that last little tip. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. I want to see you here tomorrow. Take care.